Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle. I hope you're doing well and welcome to episode 18 of Crime Stories Sunday. Last few weeks I've been inside filming this, but today it's beautiful. It's been freezing overnight, I think. There's still a little bit of frost on the ground, nice and fresh. It's about 7 a.m, so hopefully it's not too peoply around here. Anyway, here we are, episode 18, and this one is a head scratcher. I like these kind of cases. This one confused the police and the coroner, who at an eventual inquest delivered an open verdict. So yeah, buckle up, this is a strange one. Get your thinking caps on. The mysterious death of Alan Jeal in 2014 made headlines across the UK, but I'm not sure how many people internationally outside of the UK will have heard of this one. But Alan Jeal was a 64-year-old man who was found nearly naked, apart from socks on one shoe, on Perranporth Beach in Cornwall, which is beautiful. The coastlines of Cornwall in the southwest of England are stunning. I love Cornwall. It's one of my spiritual homes, I think. He'd been washed upon the shore. What was particularly strange was that he had a pair of rolled up socks stuffed into his mouth. He'd suffered significant unexplained injuries. So from the beginning, the investigation into Alan Jeal's death has been confounded by several of these unusual aspects. You know, sometimes bodies do get washed up on shorelines throughout the world, but people who've jumped off cliffs, drowned accidentally, it becomes obvious how they've died, but not in Alan Jeal's case. To this very day, detectives are unable to say whether he was killed by someone else, whether he took his own life, or whether his death was an accident. The mystery was featured on the BBC's Crime Watch programme, which has run for many years. But after appeals for witnesses, appeals for information via Crime Watch, police are no further in solving this puzzle. No one knows what happened to Alan Jeal. Or does somebody know something and has got away with it? So this is what we know. This is all we know about one of the most mysterious deaths in Cornwall's history. Let's get into the story of the head-scratching death of 64-year-old Alan Jeal. Alan Jeal was born in London, but he grew up in Cornwall. As a child, he lived in St Minver. He was adopted alongside his brother Derek and his sister Linda. Their upbringing was unremarkable, as far as I know. They were just a normal family. He attended Bodmin Grammar School and by all accounts was an intelligent student. In his younger years, he was a keen surfer. Surfers in the UK gravitate towards Cornwall. The surf is up often. When I've been to Cornwall, there's surfers out there every day on the various beaches. The waves, they lend themselves well to surfing. And he led the surfer lifestyle, kind of relaxed, easy. But he was a sporting young man. He played squash to a high level and was in a local league. He was also a member of a pool team. He liked sports cars, photography, beekeeping, mine and mineral collecting as he got older. And he read a vast amount of books across different genres. He was a huge fan of science fiction, but he also liked detective stories. He liked the puzzles that we're puzzling about today. He enjoyed computing, online gaming, computer programming. He was all round, a guy that had a lot of interests. Alan's brother Derek said of Alan Alan lived to surf and was a surf type. He lived a casual and relaxed lifestyle, but he was a reclusive type with only a small circle of friends. So I think it's safe to say that Alan was a bit of a loner, but the friends he did have spoke highly of him. As we've seen, he had a wide range of interests, so presumably he socialised whilst doing things rather than socialising for the sake of it. And I can appreciate that. I'm that kind of person myself. One of his longtime friends, Kathy Bassett, described Alan as very intelligent. He was part of a technical team in his younger years that helped Dr. Peter Mitchell in his Nobel Prize-winning research at the Glynn Institute in Bodmin. He later became a self-employed electrician, and he retired in 2003. So he retired fairly early. In 2004, he moved to Wadebridge to an apartment where he lived a quiet, reclusive lifestyle in his retirement. And I think he probably became more reclusive as he got older. Is that a sign of depression? Don't know. Is that a sign of just being comfortable with his own life? Just as likely, to be honest. But this is what detectives found out after a 6-month, very extensive investigation about the last few weeks of his life. So the investigating officer in the case was Detective Inspector Steve Hambley, who said, "We carried out inquiries trying to find out whom Alan was associated with. I have to say, we have not been able to find anyone who would fit that mould." So in the last few weeks of his life, he was very, very reclusive. Hambley went on to say his last known social interaction was around New Year of 2014. So nearly 2 months before his death. So again, was he suffering from depression, or was he just comfortable with his own interests, doing his own thing? He wasn't working, he retired in 2003, but he wasn't claiming any state benefits either. So he wasn't disabled. He lived a frugal life in his small apartment, and his purchases were unremarkable. He had the occasional glass of wine, but he was just a guy living his life. But this is strange. This is one strange purchase that detectives found. He purchased a 10-kilogram weighted training vest, the type of kind of vest you put on when you're training, when you're running or cycling or something, and it makes your body heavier, so your body has to work harder. And 2-kilogram ankle weights from Amazon. They were never located. Did he take those with him on the day he died? It's unclear why Alan brought these things, because he wasn't a member of any gym. He didn't have any other training equipment like weights or a cycle or anything like that. So you have to beg the question, did he buy those things so that he could weigh himself down in the ocean when he jumped? But to begin to understand exactly what went down on the day he died, we've got to go through step by step. So let's start from the beginning. February 24th, 2014. At 8:30 a.m, Alan switched on his desktop computer. At 11:52 a.m, he was captured on CCTV walking past Bridge Tools, a shop on Gonvina Hill in Wadebridge. He was then seen on a CCTV camera 18 minutes later withdrawing £100 in cash from an ATM outside the Barclays Bank on Molesworth Street. And then he entered a local store, the Co-op, where he spent £2.40 on a box of plasters, like plasters that you put on small injuries, and a newspaper. He then returned home, where he carried out a search on his computer for bus routes that went from Wadebridge to Truro, which is further south, Newquay to Truro, and then Wadebridge to Camelford. Very specific searches. At 12:50, neighbours, because he lived in quite a small apartment and there was other apartments around it, neighbours heard raised voices coming from Alan's apartment. However, no one saw anyone entering or leaving Alan's apartment, or the building where Alan's apartment was located. And when he left for his final time, he was alone. I would deduce from that perhaps he was talking to someone on the phone, perhaps having an argument with someone on the phone. Is that significant? Don't know. Because if he was talking to someone on the phone, that person was never located. But neither was Alan's mobile phone, so we'll get there. At 4:41 p.m, he shut down his desktop computer before leaving the home, which, on analysis of his computer, that was unusual. He used to just let the computer go to sleep rather than turning it off fully. So, was that a sign of finality? Don't know. Or did the computer just need to do updates or something like that? Don't know. 4 minutes later, he was seen on CCTV outside of Bridge Tools, where he'd been earlier in the day, heading into the centre of Wadebridge. He was wearing a light blue raincoat. This coat has never been recovered. Bear this in mind, because this is significant later on. And he was carrying a rucksack on his back. He was wearing different clothes to those he was seen earlier in the day. At least it looked like that on CCTV. Which is out of character for him, because he wasn't a guy that was really concerned about his appearance. But did he spill something down his first set of clothes? Was he going to meet someone, therefore he changed his clothes? We'll probably never know. Whether that's significant or not. But the raincoat is, the light blue raincoat is, so keep that one in your mind. It's believed then that Alan caught the number 594 Western Greyhound bus from Wadebridge to Truro. He arrived in Truro around 6:14. He was seen getting off the bus. He spent the next 30 minutes or so wandering around Truro town centre on his own. He was always on his own. So those raised voices that were heard from neighbours didn't correlate with him meeting anyone. Not that CCTV footage picked up anyway. Cameras captured him in Truro walking towards the public toilets in Truro town centre. Is that relevant? Was he just going to go and relieve himself? Or, it's been speculated, was he gay? Was he embarking on sexual encounters with men? And public toilets are one place where that might occur. We'll get there as well, because that's one theory. At 6:50 p.m, he caught another bus out of Truro to Newquay, which arrived at 8:16 p.m. He was again spotted around Newquay town centre, along Bank Street towards Marcus Hill, and then up East Street, which is one of the main shopping streets in Newquay. So he was just kind of walking along. But, by that time the shops were closed. So was he heading somewhere? Was he just wandering around? Was he waiting to meet someone? We don't know. But then, after an hour or so of just walking around and being spotted on various cameras, he returned to Newquay bus station, where he caught the 9:15 p.m. service to Perranporth, his final destination. Now, it's interesting that the bus from Truro to Newquay goes through Perranporth. So he'd been through Perranporth once to get to Newquay. So why did he make the journey to Newquay? Because he was on his own. He was wandering around. He didn't do anything. Shops were closed. Don't know. At 10:27 p.m, he was seen for the final time on CCTV walking along Beach Road in Perranporth, close to the spot where his body was discovered the day later. This is the last known sighting of Alan of any kind. That was that. 2 p.m. the next day, the 25th of February 2014. An off-duty police officer and his wife were walking along Perranporth Beach, beautiful beach, with their dog. It was high tide, and the tides in Cornwall come right into the coves. They've etched out beautiful caves in cliffs. It's incredibly beautiful. I can't tell you how beautiful those beaches are. Anyway, they discovered Alan's body, and it was only about 30 metres, just lying on the beach in front of the Watering Hole bar, which is a bar very, very close to the beach, like a beach bar. A witness who worked at the bar didn't see Alan's body on the morning that he was discovered. This witness, had walked along the beach to get to work, and his body definitely wasn't there, so it just meant it had been washed up in that high tide. So he hadn't actually died on the beach, or else he would have been spotted earlier in the day. In a statement, the off-duty police officer said, and this is his quote, "I didn't believe it was a body. I thought it was probably a couple of plastic containers." But his wife ventured closer, and she discovered that yes, in fact, it was the body of a near-naked man. The off-duty police officer went on to say, "It was an adult male who had his face down in the sand. He was naked apart from a trainer, and he did have socks on as well. The incoming tide was washing up around the body. Could see a small amount of blood in the seawater next to the head. I noticed a cord, which turned out to be headphones, hanging around the man's torso. This man called 999 and arranged for the body to be covered and moved. Due to concerns, it would just be washed away by the sea. Being washed in, could just as easily be washed out. He was declared deceased at the scene. His body was removed and taken for autopsy." Speaking at the inquest, eventually, several months later, a Coast Guard called Matthew Pavitt, who knew those tides, that area very, very well, explained where he believed Alan had entered the water. And this is his quote. He said, "I think it's difficult to say exactly where he went in the water, but I don't think it would have been further north than Perrin Sands. There's a holiday camp there. Or further south than Droskin Point." So it was quite a narrow kind of field of where Alan could possibly have entered the water. But there are cliffs on the south side of Perranporth Beach. So did Alan jump off a cliff into the water, or was he pushed, is the question. Mr. Pavitt went on to say that, in his duties as a Coast Guard, he has seen several bodies being washed up that were deemed suicides over the years, not like all in a short space of time, over the years. And he added that sometimes people go to places of historical significance to them. So places that they loved, places that they frequented in their happier days. And that's where they go to take their own life, and that's absolutely true. That absolutely happens. He spent a lot of time around Perranporth and Perranporth Beach when he was a young man, so he had fond memories of the place. His family added that. But back to the 25th of February. Initially, police were unable to identify the body. His appearance didn't match any of the known missing persons that had been recorded in the local area. They knew he hadn't been in the water for very long, so this had to be a current missing person rather than, one that has been missing for many, many, many years. Officers who worked with the Human Identification and Forensic Arts Department was able to create a stunningly lifelike image of how Alan might have appeared in life, in hope that someone would recognise him. 7 days later, as Alan just lay in the morgue, an unidentified person, detectives finally got the break they needed. That photo was put out into the press, and members of Alan's family saw it and knew instantly that it was Alan, and they said it was incredibly close to how Alan looked in life. But although his body had been identified, and they were then able to go and look at his computer, his shopping movements, find all the CCTV, kind of do all that investigative stuff, they were unable to piece together exactly what happened in those final moments. After that final sighting of him on CCTV, close to Perranporth Beach. They declared his body suspicious because of those unusual features. The fact that he was almost completely naked. He had socks stuffed into his mouth. There was headphones in his mouth. They couldn't have got there by accident, police deduced. And this became a hugely complex investigation, which yielded very little evidence, and which is why the police eventually turned to BBC's Crime Watch programme to appeal for witnesses. They did a complete reconstruction of the day to hopefully jog someone's memory, but nothing came of it. Detectives were baffled. Why did he have these socks and headphones stuffed into his mouth? Well, this is where detectives started with a theory that they did later discount because there was no evidence for it, but this was just one theory. Sometimes people put things in their mouth, like stuff things in their mouth, to stop them breathing temporarily as part of an autoerotic thing. Apparently it's meant to heighten sexual pleasure. And the socks were Alan's. Right, it's not like someone had stuffed their own socks into Alan's mouth. It was deduced eventually that they were Alan's socks. Why the headphones? They thought that perhaps Alan had headphones in and was listening to music when he put the socks in, and the headphone kind of cable cord just kind of got looped around the socks. So that could have been accidental and Alan didn't realise. Well, why was he naked? Well, parts of Perranporth Beach, the dunes, the sand dunes, are known to be frequented by nudists, people who go out naked. So that could be why Alan was completely naked. But at night, late at night, February, not the warmest, but possible. But there was no evidence of Alan ever being involved in the nudist scene. Had he kept it completely secret? Possibly. The sand dunes around there are also known to be areas where men frequent for transient sexual encounters. But again, there was no evidence that Alan was ever with anyone else. Did he meet someone there? We don't know. If he did meet someone there, they weren't caught on the CCTV footage with Alan in those final movements that were recorded. Did he meet a random stranger there? Possibly. But detectives eventually kind of dropped the theory because there was no evidence ever that Alan was gay ever in his life. But he lived a reclusive lifestyle, so would people know necessarily? Maybe not. You don't know. But this is what Detective Inspector Hambley said about the theory. We have no reason to believe Alan ever visited Perranporth for that reason, for sex, or had any interest in nudism. We're also talking 10:30 p.m. in February. It's something we've looked at, but not something that's come out with too many legs. Forensic pathologist Dr. Amanda Jeffrey, who carried out the post-mortem examination, admitted that the discoveries were concerning. She had concerns. She said the sock was blocking the back of the throat with a set of headphones looped behind the sock. The sock was partly clenched between his teeth. If there were someone else's socks, that lends you to think, yes, there's someone else involved, but his own socks, why did he have another pair of socks with him, is the thing. The forensic pathologist went on to say, it's clear the socks were purposefully stuffed into his mouth. It would be a rather unusual thing to do to oneself. I'm not aware of this being a recommended practice of taking your own life. It's possible the headphones were inadvertently dragged into the mouth at the same time the sock was inserted, so it would suggest the sock was inserted in a hurried manner. The Coast Guard, Mr. Pavitt, said in his experience it was not unusual for people who were wishing to end their own lives to put objects in the mouth. He'd seen it before with suicides that he'd witnessed, as his many years as a Coast Guard. And he said that sometimes people do this to hide distressing sounds, to stop other people hearing what they're doing. But this was a lonely beach at 10:30 at night. So would he have needed to do that? Maybe he felt he needed to do that. Something I've thought is that maybe he put the socks in his mouth as something to clench on as he was drowning. Almost like, not a comforter, but just I don't know, to help himself. I don't know. I just don't know. A number of other items were found in the vicinity of Alan's body. Bear in mind he was naked, almost naked. This is what was found. A navy jacket was found near his body. Was it the same jacket that he was seen on CCTV? Inside the jacket pocket was Alan's wallet containing a photograph of himself as a 2-year-old boy. Interesting. And £95 in cash. And then a further £10 note was found in the other pocket. So he hadn't spent the £100 that he drew out of the cash machine earlier in the day. So why did he draw £100 out that he didn't use? If he knew he was going to end his own life, why did he draw any money out at all? Why did he buy plasters? Odd, isn't it? His rucksack and a woolly hat were also found on the beach nearby, and it was established that they were his. The rucksack was largely empty, apart from those plasters that he bought earlier in the day. A pen, and get this, a bag full of dog faeces in the rucksack. There was a bag, like a poop bag, with dog faeces in it. But Alan didn't own a dog. So was he picking up someone else's dog faeces? Or did someone put it there? The jacket, on inspection, after careful inspection, it was believed not to be the jacket that Alan had been seen wearing on CCTV. So had he taken another jacket with him? Was he intending to go away somewhere? Because he had another jacket with him, he had another pair of socks with him. Or was this someone else's jacket? Had he just put on the wrong jacket? We don't know. The other shoe, he was wearing one shoe, the other shoe was found on the beach. The rest of his clothing that he was wearing in those final hours was never located, nor was the light blue raincoat type jacket that he was seen wearing on CCTV. They were also unable to locate the bank card that he'd used to draw out that £100 from the cash machine earlier on in the day. He was thought to have a credit card, that was never found. His mobile phone and his iPod were all missing. So had he been robbed? Well, no, apparently not, because they'd left the cash. The cash was there. Had it just been that Alan had maybe had an item of clothing on when he entered the water and they just fell out of his pocket? Possibly. Now, at post-mortem, it was found that he had significant injuries to his chest, his torso, his spine, his head and his brain. So significant injuries, which probably in themselves perhaps could have killed him. The forensic pathologist said that she couldn't exclude a scenario where these injuries had occurred as Alan fell. Perhaps if he jumped off a cliff and he fell onto rocks. That's how the injuries occurred shortly before death. That's a possibility. Or whilst lying in the water, if he was being kind of, bashed about by the waves. But she said it was more likely, the injuries were more consistent with falling from a height. So it was likely that Alan either jumped off a cliff or was pushed off a cliff. There was also a cut on his right hand that resembled the type that you get from a knife. That could have been just a sharp object that his hand had hit in the sea. Or it could have been him grabbing a knife. Had he been threatened with a knife and he grabbed it? Was he threatened with a knife and someone then pushed him off the cliff? We can only speculate, We really can. But his cause of death was drowning. His lungs were heavily waterlogged. Water had bypassed the sock, got into his lungs, and that was his cause of death. The manner of death, however, could not be established. And those training items, the 10 kilogram training vest and the ankle weights, were never discovered. They were never found. They knew he bought them, they weren't in his apartment, and they were never located at his body. Had he worn those while he entered the water to weigh himself down and they'd just been washed away? We'll never know. This is what the coroner said. The most likely scenario is that the injuries were caused by a fall from a height and drowning that occurred in the water. He died partially as a result of head and chest injuries as well as the drowning process. It's possible that this represents a very unusual suicide, although I cannot exclude the possibility that another person was involved in his death. So it's September 2014, following an extensive investigation which was finally closed down. His death was determined as unexplained and the coroner reached an open verdict. Detective Inspector Hambley at the inquest said it was a very unusual case, and it was a case that they puzzled over. It was one of the most unusual cases that he'd ever had to deal with. But it remains an open verdict to this day. And that's it. We just don't know. The detective said, while I cannot discount that Alan's death was a result of a suicide, there are aspects which would tend to contradict this. The fact that personal items were missing does not entirely fit with a suicide. Finally, I have to consider if Alan's death was a result of homicide. If that's the case, I can only assume that Alan's killer would have been a stranger to him. If Alan had been killed, the killer left no forensic link to himself on items recovered or on Alan's body. Also, the killer has not drawn attention to himself by being seen by witnesses or on CCTV. Robbery does not appear to have been a motive, considering the cash was found in the wallet. In the absence of further information, I personally remain open-minded as to the circumstances of Alan's death. The best of the best police officers in Cornwall, extensive forensic examinations from all possible angles for 6 months could not determine whether someone got away with murder. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I love these kind of unsolved mysteries. If you like them as well, I'll do some more of these because there are a number that I'd like to discuss with you. I'll see you very soon for episode 19. So it's goodbye from Miss Cassie Springer and Miss Tillington. Lovely morning, beautiful. I'll see you very soon. Bye guys.